chapter 20 as well. Any quick reflections or memories from yesterday's reading? where we left. I'll get my notebook. Yes, what is that?
I was going to say it was interesting when they were talking about the visit to the ashram, and Prabhupada's devotees were were a little bit taken aback by how maybe irreligious the ashram men were, and just how kind of flippant they were, and commenting on women and things like that. I thought that was kind of interesting.
You said in the ashram, the Dr. Mishra's ashram, you referred?
Yeah. The other fellows that were there, the ones that weren't there with Prabhupada, I think they were calling them the ashram men. We're commenting on the looks of the women and just kind of almost mocking Prabhupada at times. They said, which I thought was kind of surprising for a bunch of guys living in an ashram.
Yeah.
And many new devotees also joined, and some of them had some dreams about Prabhupada and Krishna, which is a positive thing for the devotees. And they started taking more services.
And yesterday they all went for United Nations. We read they went for United Nations peace program, right? So all the devotees are sharing their initial times, experiences, especially this is called planting the seed. They are getting really association of Prabhupada. Did we read this one? No, we didn't read. We are supposed to start from here, right? September 8th. We haven't read Janmashtami Day, did we? No.
No.
Okay, so it's good. September 8th, Janmashtami Day, the appearance day of Lord Krishna. 1 year before, just is anniversary in American now for Prabhupada. 1 year before, Prabhupada had observed Krishna's birthday at sea aboard the Jaladuta, just out of Colombo. Now, exactly 1 year later, he had a small crew of Hare Krishna chanters. He would gather them all together, have them observe a day of chanting, reading scriptures, fasting and feasting, and the next day would be initiation. Wow, very well. Initiation.
Prabhu, did we read about Mr. Bogart coming to the temple and being sent away by Steve?
Oh, we didn't read it? Oh, no, we didn't read this one. Yeah, I thought we read it. Okay.
Yeah, because the next is about Mr. Bogart coming to the program, and Prabhupada was interested, and
he said he's going to come.
Yeah, so I think Prabhupada regarded Mr. Bogart's imminent visit.
Actually, here, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Prabhupada regarded Mr. Bogart's imminent visit as very important, and he wanted to cook for him personally and receive him in his apartment with the best hospitality. When the day arrived, Prabhupada and Keith cooked together in the small kitchen for several hours, making the best Indian delicacies. Prabhupada posted Stanley downstairs and told him not to allow anyone to come up while he was cooking the feast for Mr. Bogart. Stanley assented, blinking his eyes with his far-off saintly look. This is interesting. Listen. Stanley stationed himself downstairs in the forefront. A few of the boys were there, and he told them You can go up to see the Swami. No one can. About 12 noon, Larry Bogart arrived, pale, elderly, and well-dressed by Lower East Side standards. He said he wanted to see Swami Bhaktivedanta. Sorry, Stanley informed him, his boy's face trying to impress the stranger with the seriousness of the order. The Swami is busy now, and he said no one can see him. Mr. Bogart decided he would wait. There was no chair in the storefront, but Stanley brought him a folding chair. It was a hot day. Mr. Bogart looked at his watch several times. A half hour passed. Stanley sat chanting and sometimes staring up blankly. After an hour, Mr. Bogart asked if he could see the Swami now. Stanley assured him that he could not, and Mr. Bogart left in a huff. After, Swamiji had very anxious, wondering why Mr. Bogart had not arrived. Finally, he sent Keith downstairs, and Stanley told him about the man whom he had turned away. What? Keith exploded. But that was within moments. Swamiji heard that what had happened. He became furious. He came down to the forefront. You fool! You silly fool! You turned and angrily rebuked everyone in the room, but mostly Stanley. No one had even seen the Swami so angry. Then Swamiji walked away in disgust and returned to his apartment. Stanley had been going off the deep end for some time, and now he became even more abstracted in his behavior. Stanley's mother knew her son had been troubled for years, and she had therefore requested Prabhupada to keep a very close watch on him. But now the boy deteriorated in his responsibility and stopped cleaning the kitchen and storefront. He would stand alone looking at something. He was gloomy and sometimes spoke of suicide. And he stopped chanting regularly. The boys didn't know what to do, but they thought perhaps he should be sent home to his mother. One day, Stanley went up to see the Swami. He came in and sat down. Prabhupada. Yes, Stanley. May I have $50? Prabhupada. Why? Prabhupada used to handle all the money himself. So when his boy needed something, even if it were only 25 cents for the bus, they had to see Swami. He was never wasteful. He was so frugal that whenever he received a letter, he would carefully tear the envelope apart and use the reverse side as a writing paper. Prabhupada knew the value of it. So he wanted to know why Stanley wanted $50. Stanley replied in a small voice, I want to purchase some gasoline and set myself on fire. Oh my God. Prabhupada saw Chuck at the doorway and told him to call Bruce at once. Bruce quickly came up and sat with Prabhupada and Stanley. Prabhupada told Bruce, whom he had recently appointed to handle petty cash, to give Stanley $50, and he had Stanley repeat what he wanted the money. But Swamiji, Bruce protested, we don't have that much money. There you see Stanley. Prabhupada spoke very calmly. Bruce says, we don't have the money. Then they phoned Stanley's mother. Later, Prabhupada said that because Stanley had asked for $50 for gasoline, which cost only 35 cents, he could therefore understand Stanley's crazy. Stanley was very crazy. So this is again interesting. The man from United Nations, the leader of the peace movement, Mr. Bogart, as he promised that he will come, and the day has come. Prabhupada is very excited that he's going to meet a man from United Nations. He can make a big impact. So, okay, the day has come. Prabhupada is excited. He cooked personally with Keith to nice feast. So, because no one should, very nice fish. Looks like he gave his full heart to do it. I can see. He didn't want it to be disturbed. He said, he put Stanley at the next to the stairs. He said, "Don't let anyone come." Mr. Stanley followed the instruction very strictly. He even let Mr. Larry Bogart and made him wait and didn't let him go in. And it really frustrated Prabhupada. That's interesting, isn't it? That's this is a nice remember we can do a play on this. Mr. Larry Bogart, remind me. So anyway, Prabhupada came and Prabhupada was very furious by hearing this incident and he became mad. And looks like Stanley, he's showing his usual behavior again. He stopped chanting, he stopped doing service. Now he's asking Prabhupada if he can give $50. For what I can, no, not for me. So he said, I will put gasoline on myself and burn. So interestingly, Prabhupada calls also his assistant. He said, come quickly, Bruce. Give him $50. So we don't have $50 to pay. So he heard in front of him and found region, and they called Stanley's mother and told the situation. He needs for gasoline, it can cost only 35 cents, but he's asking for $50. Prabhupada is going through furthermore crazy life of it. Yes, go ahead, Saikan Prabhu.
Keith was cooking lunch in the kitchen as usual, but today Swamiji was standing by the kitchen stove, watching his pupil. Keith paused and looked up from his cooking. Swamiji, could I become your disciple? Yes, Prabhupada replied. Why not? Your name will be Krishna Dasa. This simple exchange was the first request for discipleship and Prabhupada's first granting of initiation. But there was more to it than that. Prabhupada announced that he would soon hold an initiation. What's initiation, Swamiji? One of the boys asked. And Prabhupada replied, I will tell you later. First, they had to have beads. Keith went to Tandy's leather company and bought half-inch wooden beads and cord to string them on. It was much better, Swamiji said, to count on beads while chanting, a strand of 108 beads to be exact. This employed the sense of touch, and like the Vaishnavas of India, one could count how many times one chanted the mantra. Some devotees in India had a string of more than 1,000 beads, he had said, and they would chant through them again and again. He taught the boys how to tie a double knot between each of the 108 beads. The number 108 had a special significance. There were 108 Upanishads as well as 108 principal gopis, the chief devotees of Lord Krishna. The initiates would be taking vows, he said, and one vow would be to chant a prescribed number of rounds on the beads each day. And about a dozen of Swamiji's boys were eligible, but there was no strict system for their selection. If they wanted to, they could do it. Steve, although I was already doing whatever Swamiji recommended, I sensed that initiation was a heavy commitment, and with my last strong impulses to remain completely independent, I hesitated to take initiation. Prabhupada's friends saw the initiation in different ways. Some saw it as very serious, and some took it to be like a party or a happening. While stringing their beads in the courtyard, Wally and Howard talked a few days before the ceremony. So here, Prabhupada, while Keith was cooking one day, he asked Swamiji if he could become his disciple, and Prabhupada said, why not? And mentioned that his initiation name will be Krishna Das. And this was the first time somebody requested Prabhupada and him accepting to give initiations. So then he would announce that he will have an initiation ceremony, and when people asked what is initiation, he would have them. He said he asked them to wait. And Keith went to a leather company to buy half-inch wooden beads and to get a cord to string them on. And Prabhupada explains the significance of the beads, that the 108 number resembles 108 Upanishads as well as 108 gopis, who are the chief devotees of Lord Krishna. And he said while initiation they would be taking vows, and one of the vows would be to chant a prescribed number of rounds each day. There were certain boys, approximately 12, who were eligible, but there was no system for selection. It was up to them if they wanted to do it. Some people like Steve, He said that he's already doing what Swamiji recommended, but he thought initiation was a heavy commitment and he hesitated to take initiation.
Prasanthi.
Prabhupada's friends saw the initiation of the system. Wally, it's just a formality. You accept Swamiji as your spiritual master. Howard.
Missed something, right? This one, did you read fully?
Yeah, I can read. I thought that is done. Prabhupada's friends saw the initiation in different ways. Some saw it as very serious, and some took it to be like a party or happening. While stringing their beads in the courtyard, Wally and Howard talked a few days before the ceremony. Wally, it's just a formality. You accept Swamiji as your spiritual master. Howard, what does that entail? Wally, nobody is very sure. In India, it is a standard practice. Do you think you want to take him as a spiritual master? Howard, I don't know. He would seem to be a good spiritual master, whatever whatever that is. I mean, I like him and his teachings a lot. So I guess in a way, he's already my spiritual master. I just don't understand how it would change the situation. Wally, neither do I. I guess it doesn't. It's just a formality. September 8th, Janmashtami Day, the appearance day of Lord Krishna. One year before, Prabhupada had observed Krishna's birthday at sea aboard the Jaladuta just out of Colombo. Now, exactly 1 year later, he had a small crew of Hare Krishna chanters. He would gather them all together, have them observe a day of chanting, reading scriptures, fasting and feasting, and next day would be initiation. At 6 o'clock, Prabhupada came down and was about to give him morning class as usual. When one of the boys asked if he would read from his own manuscript, Prabhupada appeared shy, yet he did not hide his pleasure at having been asked to read his own Bhagavad Gita commentary. Usually, he would read a verse from Dr. Radhakrishna's Oxford edition of the Gita. Although the commentary presented imperialist philosophy,
Impersonalist
philosophy, the translations Prabhupada said were 90% accurate. But this morning, he sent Roy up to fetch his manuscript, and for an hour, he read from his typewritten pages. For observing Janmashtami, there were special rules. There should be no eating, and the day was to be spent chanting, reading, and discussing Krishna consciousness. If anyone became too weak, he said there was fruit in the kitchen, but better that they fast until the feast at midnight, just like the devotees in India. He said that in India, millions of people, Hindus, Muslims, or whatever, observed the birthday of Lord Krishna. And in every temple, there were festivities, celebrations of pastimes of Krishna. Wally and Howard started talking about the initiation that is going to happen. And while stringing the beads, then they were discussing what is the significance of it. And Wally said that it is just a standard practice. He is already a spiritual master for us. And Howard said he doesn't know. Anyway, he is following him, and he is a good spiritual master. So he feels that he is already a spiritual master for him. And so the situation doesn't change. And they decided that it was just a formality. And on the Janmashtami day, the appearance of Lord Krishna, so Prabhupada, 1 year ago, Prabhupada was in the Jaladuta ship just out of Colombo. He celebrated that in the ship. But now, after 1 year, he has a small crew of Hare Krishna chanters, And on that day, they observed the day by chanting, reading scriptures, fasting, and feasting. The next day would be the initiation. Uh, and at 6 o'clock, when Prabhupada started the class, as usual, so one of the boys asked to read Bhagavad Gita from his own manuscript. Previously, he used to read it from Radhakrishna's Oxford edition. And he said that it is the impersonalist philosophy and 90% of it is accurate. But that day he read that book he read his own manuscript for about an hour. And on the Janmashtami day, he asked the boys to observe fasting, and if somebody is weak, they can take a fruit in the kitchen. And he also explained them about the importance of Janmashtami, and also told that many people would fast in India that day. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. I can go to you read already. Yeah. Who's Nipa? You can read, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah, you read.
And now he said at length, I'll tell you what is meant by initiation. Initiation means that the spiritual master accepts the student and agrees to take charge, and the student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. He paused. No one spoke. Any questions? And when there were none, he got up and walked out. The devotees were stunned. What had they just heard him say? For weeks he had stressed that when anyone claims to be God, he should be considered a dog. My mind's just been blown, said Wally. Everybody's mind is blown, said Howard. Swamiji just dropped a bomb. They thought of Keith. He was wise, consult Keith. But Keith was in the hospital. Talking among themselves, they became more and more confused. Swamiji's remark had confounded their judgment. Finally, Wally decided to go to the hospital to see Keith. Keith listened to the whole story. How Swamiji had told them to fast, and how he had read from his manuscript, and how he had said he would explain initiation, and how everybody had leaned forward. All years and Swamiji had dropped a bomb. The student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. Any questions? Swamiji had asked softly, and then he had walked out. I don't know if I want to be initiated now, Wally confessed. We have to worship him as God. Well, you are already doing that by accepting whatever he tells you, Keith replied. And he advised that they talk it over with Swamiji before the initiation. So Wally went back to the temple and consulted Howard, and together they went up to Swamiji's apartment. Does what you told us this morning, Howard asked, mean we are supposed to accept the spiritual master to be God? So here it all summarizes about the initiation process, and Swamiji finally says at length that initiation means spiritual master accepts the student and agrees to take charge, whereas student accepts the spiritual master and worship him as God. And then he paused. Swamiji paused and asked if anyone has any doubts or queries. And then when there was none, he got up and walked out. The devotees at the same time, they were shocked, like hearing him say that we are supposed to consider him as God. And they thought of consulting Keith in the same time, but Keith was in the hospital. So talking among themselves, they were confused. They go to Keith and narrate the whole story of how the initiation process meant and how Swamiji explained, and then asked if there were any questions. And then he walked out. And Wally finally confessed that not being sure that if initiation is something she should consider. Um, well, Keith replied, you're doing that by accepting whatever he tells. So he advised to talk it over to Swamiji before the initiation. So Wally heads back to the temple, consults Howard, and together they went to Swamiji's apartment. and then asked about the narration he said about the initiation process. Does he mean that they have to accept Swamiji as God and pay the same respect as God?
Nice. Yeah, Pranath.
Yes, Prabhu. That means he is due the same respect as God, being God's representative, Prabhupada replied calmly. Then he is not God? No, Prabhupada said. God is God. The spiritual master is his representative. Therefore, he is as good as God because he can deliver God to the sincere disciple. Is that clear? It was. It was a mental and physical strain to go all day without eating. Jan was restless. She complained that she couldn't possibly stay any longer, but had to go take care of her cat. Prabhupada tried to overrule her, but she left anyway. Most of the prospective initiates spent several hours that day stringing their shiny red wooden beads. Having tied one end of the string to a window bar or a radiator, they would slide one bead at a time up the string and knot it tightly, chanting one mantra of Hare Krishna for each bead. It was devotional service, chanting and stringing your beads for initiation. Every time they knotted another bead, it seemed like a momentous event. Prabhupada said that devotees in India chanted at least 64 rounds on beads a day. Saying that Hare Krishna mantra was one mantra once on each of the 108 beads constituted one round. His spiritual master had said that anyone who didn't chant 64 rounds a day was fallen. At first, some of the boys thought that they would also have to chant 64 rounds, and they became perplexed. That would take all day. How could you go to a job if you had to chant 64 rounds? How can anyone chant 64 rounds? Then someone said Swamiji had told him that 32 rounds a day would be a sufficient minimum for the West. Wally said he had heard Swamiji say 25, but even that seemed impossible. Then Prabhupada offered the rock bottom minimum 16 rounds a day without fail. Whoever got initiated would have to promise. The bead stringing, chanting, uh, reading, and dozing went on until even at night, when everyone was invited up to Swamiji's room. As they filed through the courtyard, they sensed an unusual calm in the atmosphere, and Houston Street, just over the wall, was quiet. There was no moon. So all the aspiring devotees to get initiated, and Prabhupada explaining who is a spiritual master and the relationship with God and how to understand, the spiritual master in relationship to God and the position of spiritual master. And here we see that Jan was not willing to leave her cat for too long, and she left, uh, even though Prabhupada was instructing her to stay. And in the next paragraph, it's primarily discussed about how the prospective initiates spent their day, you know, uh, uh, tying the strings, and about the about how one chants on the beats and how many mantras one chants in each round and how many rounds to chant in a day. And Prabhupada started off saying that if you don't chant 64 rounds, if one doesn't chant 64 rounds, then he's fallen. And it was a huge task. It is a huge task actually to chant 64 rounds a day. And some of those aspiring disciples or prospective initiates were concerned And then they also felt that even 32 rounds a day would be difficult. And Prabhupada said that 32 rounds a day was the minimum. But then they heard that maybe Prabhupada said 25 sometime, which even that seemed difficult or even impossible. And then Prabhupada offered the rock bottom minimum. As we know, it's 16 rounds a day without fail.
Thank you.
Yeah, Divya is here.
Okay.
Divya. Oh, 1 second.
Yeah.
Someone can read, she'll read next. Yeah.
Yeah, Gaurang, you can read.
The bead stringing, chanting, reading, and dozing went on until 11 at night, when everyone was invited up to Swamiji's room. As they filed through the courtyard, they sensed an unusual calm in the atmosphere, and Houston Street, just over the wall, was quiet. There was no moon. As his followers sat on the floor, contentedly eating prasadam from paper plates, Swamiji sat among them, telling stories about the birth of Lord Krishna. Krishna had appeared on this evening 5,000 years ago. He was born the son of Vasudeva and Devaki in the prison of King Kamsa at midnight. His father Vasudeva immediately took him to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nanda Maharaj, a cowherd man. Prabhupada also spoke of the necessary purification of spiritual advancement. It is not enough merely to chant holy words. He said one must be pure inside and out. Chanting in purity brings spiritual advancement. The living entity becomes impure because he wants to enjoy material pleasures. The impure can become pure by following Krishna, by doing all works for Krishna. Beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time. But to advance spiritually, you must resist this temptation and continually increase your efforts in devotion. So after they finished bead stringing, chanting, reading, and their work, and which continued until 11 at night, then everyone was invited up to Prabhupada's room. And as the devotees were eating the prasadam, Swamiji started telling them the story of Krishna about his birth and how he was the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. He was born in the prison house. And his father Vasudeva took him to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nanda Maharaj.
Yeah. So here the primary purpose of this is Prabhupada was pointing purification needs resist the temptation. And all the services is not just looks like not just chanting. Prabhupada also spoke the necessity of purification for spiritual advancement. It is not enough merely to chant holy words. One must be pure inside and outside. Sometimes we see, actually we do course of time, we take it for easy, granted, or austerities, some of the austerities. Purpose, and chanting in purity brings spiritual advancement. This is the interesting point. Chanting and purity, two things has go. And now purity comes with the living entity becomes impure because he wants to enjoy the material pleasure. So basically not doing, following four regulatory principles brings purity, and we chant, it becomes very impactful. And also when we follow all this fasting and everything and render service, that also brings purity. So, but the impure can become pure by following Krishna, by doing all works for Krishna. Beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time, but no advance spiritually you must resist this temptation and continue to increase your effort and devotion. So basically Prabhupada is stressing the sadhana, apart from the chanting, all other aspects of devotional service very much needed in order to progress in Krishna consciousness. Others will take it granted and cheap and lazy. Okay, Swati Mataji, please read.
Michael Grant. I first heard about the initiation just one day before it was to take place. I had been busy with my music and hadn't been attending. I was walking down Second Avenue with one of the prospective initiates, and he mentioned to me that there was going to be something called an initiation ceremony. I asked what it was about, and he said, all I know is it means that you accept the spiritual master as God. This was a big surprise to me, and I hardly know how to take it, but I didn't take it completely serious. And the way it was mentioned to me in such an offhand way made it seems not very important. He asked me very cautiously whether I was going to
Casually.
be involved casually, whether I was going to be involved, and I also, being very casual about it, said, well, I think I will. Why not? I will give it a try. Jan didn't think she would make an obedient disciple. An initiation sounds frightening. She liked the Swami, especially cooking with him, but it was Mike who convinced her he was going, so she should come along with him. Carl Ergens knows something about initiation from his readings, and he more than the others know what a serious commitment it was. He was surprised to hear that Swamiji was offering initiation, and he was cautious about entering into it. He knew that initiation means no illicit sex, intoxication, or meat eating, and an initiation disciple would have new responsibilities for spreading the teachings to others. Kart was already feeling less involved since the Swami had moved to the Second Avenue, but he decided to attend the initiation anyway. Bill,
Hey, yeah, that's good. So are you ready for initiation? Swati Mataji?
all Krishna's mercy, Prabhuji.
Krishna's mercy. Krishna's mercy is our desire. How desperate we are. So this is now Michael Grant. So many people came and go, but Mukunda Goswami, Michael Grant, is a profound contributor to Prabhupada's movement actually, till now. He is a sannyasi, and I just saw he's in Australia. So for you, anyway, Mike, he heard about the initiation. On and off, he was disconnected for some time again, but he heard that the initiation ceremony. He was curious. When he heard what it is about, he said that you accept the spiritual master God. That's what they know. They didn't know anything else. Jan is his girlfriend. Then he kind of insisted to come. She was not very much interested, looks like, right? No, interested for the initiation, make an obedient disciple, but still like the Swami, especially cooking with him. That's a good thing. There's interesting transformation is going to take place. We all see. Carl was also where Prabhupada stayed with Carl. He was also kind of disconnected, but he knew what is the meaning. It's a big commitment. But he decided to attend the ceremony anyway. He knows, so he has not been coming for a while, but he decided to attend the ceremony. So this is a very important step which is going to take place. Without initiation, it takes, we take it for granted, looks like. You can see, okay, I'm going, no need of initiation, no need of commitment, like that. But as soon as the initiation word came, there's a official relationship is being stressed here, and it brought change, inquisitiveness within everyone's mind and heart. Okay, Sridhari or Srikar?
Bill Will Epstein had never professed to be a serious disciple. Holding initiation was just another part of Swami's scene, and you were free to take it seriously or not. He figured it was all right to take initiation even if you were not serious. He would try it. Carol Baker was surprised to hear that some people would be taking initiation even though they had no intentions of giving up their bad habits. She had stopped coming around regularly ever since the Swami had moved, and she felt no desire to ask for initiation. The Swami probably would not initiate women anyways, she figured. Robert Nelson had not forgotten the Swami and always liked to help whatever he could, but except whenever he could. But except for an occasional friendly visit, he had stopped coming. He mostly stayed to himself. He still lived uptown and was not into the Lower East Side scene. James Green thought he was not pure enough to be initiated. Who am I to be initiated? But the Swami had asked him to bring something over to the storefront. I came and it was just understood that I was supposed to be initiated. So I thought, why not? Stanley had been chanting regularly again and had come out of his crazy mood. He was sticking with the Swami and his followers. He asked his mother if he could be initiated, and she said it would be all right.
Hmm.
So here we read about different views all Srila Prabhupada's initial followers had about initiation. So Bill Epstein, he feels that initiation he feels that initiation, it's all right to take initiation even if he was not very serious. He just wanted to try. And then Carol Baker, she was surprised to hear that some of the people were wanting to take initiation, though they did not have any intentions of giving up their bad habits. So she stopped coming to visit Srila Prabhupada, and then she also did not have any desire for initiation. So she thought that, she also felt Srila Prabhupada would anyways not initiate a woman. And Robert Nelson, he would help Srila Prabhupada every now and then occasionally he would visit. And then he most of the time he stayed for himself. He still lived uptown, and then he was not into the Lower East Side scene. So he was not so much aware of initiation and not so much interested. James Green, and then he thought that he himself thought that he's not very pure enough to be initiated. And then, but again, he thought Srila Prabhupada called him, and then he was supposed, he just understood that he was supposed to be initiated. So he thought, why not give it a try? And then Stanley, so he'd been chanting regularly, and then he came out of his crazy mood, and then and then he was like keeping company of Srila Prabhupada's followers. And then he asked his mother's opinion about initiation, and then she gave an heads up. She said it will be all right.
He's the one who asked for $50 to get kerosene to get himself burned. Suicide. Let's see if Prabhupada is giving initiation to him or not. He asked his mother to be, she said yes, that's a good thing. Yes, Sridhari.
Steve wanted more time to think about it. Kate was in the hospital. Bruce had only been attending for a week or two, and it was too soon. Chuck was on a week's vacation from the regulated spiritual life at the temple, so he didn't know about the initiation. No one was asked to shave his head or even cut his hair or change his dress. No one offered Prabhupada the traditional Guru Dakshina, the donation a disciple is supposed to offer as a gesture of his great obligation to his master. Hardly anyone even relieved him of his course, so Swamiji himself had to do most of the cooking and other preparations for the initiation. He was perfectly aware of the mentality of his boys, and he didn't try to force anything on anyone. Some of the initiates didn't know until after the initiation, when they had inquired that the four rules, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling, were mandatory for all disciples. Prabhupada's
Yeah, go ahead.
Prabhupada's reply then was, I'm very glad that you are finally asking me that.
That's it? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so Steve wanted some more time to think, and Kate was in hospital, and Bruce was just attending, like it was only for a week or two, so he thought it was very soon. And Chuck was on a vacation for a week from his regulated spiritual life, and he didn't know about the initiation process. And while initiation also, no one were asked to shave his head nor cut his hair or change their dress, and they didn't even offer Prabhupada Guru Dakshina, which actually they are supposed to offer as a gesture of his obligation to the master, and they hardly didn't do any course for the initiation. So Prabhupada had to do most of the cooking and also other preparations. And because he knew the mentality of the boys, so he didn't force anyone to do anything. So, and some of them didn't know that for the initiation, they had to follow the 4 rules, which is meat eating, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling. So, when the disciples asked, then Prabhupada replied that finally he is glad they're asking the question to him.
Isn't it that's funny? So Prabhupada knew how low people were, and they won't understand anything. He didn't engage them. He did by everything by himself, and still he gave the initiation. So at least he's happy that they're asking, what we need to do. So then after that, Prabhupada gives four regulatory principles you are supposed to follow. They're trapped. Anyway, so let's see what happens. Vijan and Prabhu?
It was to be a live Vedic sacrifice with a ceremonial fire right there in the front room of Swamiji's apartment. In the center of the room was the sacrificial arena, a platform of bricks 4 inches high and 2 feet square, covered with a mound of dirt. The dirt was from the courtyard, and the bricks were from a nearby gutted building. Around the mound were like 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, whole barley grains, 5 colors of powdered dyes, and a supply of kindling. The 11 initiates took up most of the remaining space in the front room as they sat on the floor, knee to knee, around the sacrificial arena. The guests in the hallway peered curiously through the open door. For everyone except the Swami, this was all new and strange, and every step of the ceremony took place under his direction. When some of the boys had made a mess of trying to apply the Vaishnava Tilaka to their foreheads, Prabhupada had patiently guided his finger up their foreheads, making a neat, narrow V. He sat before the mound of earth, looking out at his congregation. They appeared not much different from any other group of young hippies from the Lower East Side who might have assembled at any number of happenings, spiritual, cultural, musical, or whatever. Some were just checking out a new scene, some were deeply devoted to the Swami, but everyone was curious. He had requested them to chant the Hare Krishna mantra softly throughout the ceremony, and the chanting had now become a continual drone, accompanying his mysterious movements as head priest of the Vedic ritual. So this describes what are all the various austerities which Prabhupada were doing for the initiation ceremony. So it was like there was a fire right at the front of Swamiji's apartment where he constructed a platform of bricks and which was like up to 4 inches height and 2 feet square, and it was covered with a mound of dirt which was taken from the courtyard. Also, there were 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, and whole barley grains, and 5 powdered dyes, and a supply of kindling. Although basically there was a plan to initiate 11 people actually. So there were 11 initiates who are sitting in the floor neck to neck on the sacrificial arena, and the guests were very curious, watching everything from the open door. And all these austerities were everything new for them, and it was strange. And only Prabhupada know what he is doing, and everything was happening under his direction. And also since they're trying to apply the Vaishnava Tilaka also, they were doing some mess over there, and Prabhupada passionately guided them. And also Prabhupada was looking at the congregation, so it was not much different from the group of hippies from the Lower East Side, assembled as if it was a spiritual or cultural or musical or whatever. and someone were like just checking like what's happening, but everyone was very curious because like it was like a new kind of ceremony which they never witnessed. And also Prabhupada requested everyone to chant the Hare Krishna mantra throughout the ceremony. People were and he was like he was behaving like a head priest of the Vedic rite.
He was a head priest. Anyway, so you like the tilak? So you can apply tilak now, right? I hope everyone applies tilak at home in the morning, purify, take shower. And few days back, we read that Prabhupada insisted that everyone take twice shower, right? You know that, remember? So that's the Brahminical culture. He began by lighting a dozen sticks of incense. Then he performed purification with water. Taking a spoon in his left hand, he put 3 drops of water from a goblet into his right and sipped the water. He repeated the procedure 3 times. The 4th time he did not sip but flicked the water onto the floor behind him. He then passed the spoon and goblet around for the initiates, who tried to copy what they had seen. When some of them placed the water in the wrong hand and sipped in the wrong way, Swamiji patiently corrected them. Now he said, repeat after me. And he had them repeat, one word at a time, a Vedic mantra of purification. Om apavitra pavitra va sarva vastam gato piva yasmaret pundari kaksham sa vaya vyantara suchi Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. The initiates tried falteringly to follow his pronunciation of the words, which they had never heard before. Then he gave the translation, unpurified or purified, or even having passed through all situations. One who remembers the lotus feet, lotus-eyed Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, is cleansed within and without. 3 times he repeated the sipping of water, the drone of the Hare Krishna mantra filling the room, as the goblet passed from initiate to initiate and back again to him. And 3 times he led the chanting of the mantra, Om Pavitra. Then he raised the hand, and as the buzzing of the chanting trailed off into silence, he began his lecture. So here initiation's setup is there. Everyone is sitting in the curious what's happening. Prabhupada chanted all these mantras, but these mantras, Brahminical mantras, he didn't chant. They never heard about it, of course. It's for Brahmins to chant. So he's chanting, so everybody's curious what is happening. So he chanted the purification mantra, mantra for purification. And then he started a talk, initiation talk. Are you going to read?
After the lecture, he asked the devotees one by one to hand him their beads, and he began chanting on them. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The sound of everyone chanting filled the room. After finishing one strand, he would summon the owner of the beads and hold the beads up while demonstrating how to chant. Then he would announce the initiate's spiritual name. His disciples would take the beads, bow to the floor, and recite, Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. There were 11 initiates and so 11 sets of beads. The chanting lasted for over an hour. Prabhupada gave each boy a string of neck beads, which he said were like dog collars, identifying the devotees as Krishna's dog. After Wali received his beads and his new name, Mahapati, he returned to his place beside Howard and said, That was wonderful. Getting your beads is wonderful. In turn, each initiate received his beads and his spiritual name. Howard became Hayagriva, Wali became Umapati, Bill became Ravinder Sarup, Carl became Karlapati, James became Jagannath, Mike became Mukunda, Jan became Janaki, Roy became Rayaram, and Stanley became Stradisa.
Yes, Stradisa.
Another Stanley, a broken boy with a job in Janus, a college student from Montreal, both of whom had rather peripheral relationships with the Swami, appeared that night and took initiation with the rest, receiving the names Satyavrat and Janardana. So after lecture, he asked each of the devotees who've been initiated to hand him their beads. So he chanted on their beads, and then after the chanting was done, each disciple would come and offer the pranam mantra, and so that happened 11 times because there were 11 initiates, and Prabhupada also gave them a neck bead, which identified them as Krishna's dog, as a servant of Krishna.
Yeah, I wonder where did he get the neck beads from? And chanting beads, they got interesting. They got the neck beads also. How Prabhupada arranged the neck beads, I don't know. So this is 11. I didn't realize that Jan and Mukunda, they were just trying, they were coming, but I didn't know they were taking initiation also. Mike became Mukunda, Jan became Janaki. So I thought they would be initiated later. Okay, second to please read.
Then Swamiji began the fire sacrifice by sprinkling the colored dyes across the mound of earth before him. With fixed attention, his congregation watched each mysterious move as he picked up the twigs and wooden splinters, dipped them into clarified butter, lit them in a candle flame, and built a small fire in the center of the mound. He mixed sesame seeds, barley, and clarified butter in a bowl, and then passed the mixture around. Each new disciple took a handful of the mixture to offer into the fire. He then began to recite Sanskrit prayers, asking everyone please to repeat them, each prayer ending with the responsive chanting of the word Swaha 3 times. And with Swaha, the initiates would toss some of the sesame barley mixture into the fire. Swamiji kept pouring butter, piling up wood, and chanting more prayers until the mound was blazing. The prayers kept coming, and the butter kept pouring, and the fire got larger, and the room got hotter. After 15 or 20 minutes, he asked each of the initiates to place a banana in the fire. With 11 bananas heaped on the fire, the flames began to die, and the smoke thickened. A few of the initiates got up and ran coughing into the other room, and the guests retreated into the hallway. But Swamiji went on pouring the remaining butter and seeds into the fire. This kind of smoke does not disturb, he said. Other smoke disturbs, but this kind of smoke does not. Even though everyone's eyes were watering with irritation, he asked that the windows remain closed, so most of the smoke was contained within the apartment and no neighbors complained. So here, Prabhupada is doing the fire sacrifice. He basically everyone was looking in attention while watching his moves, and he used to offer butter butter and sesame seeds, barley as a mix, and he passed it around. Each disciple would take a handful and offer it to the fire, and he asked them to repeat the word Swaha 3 times. And this happened for 20 minutes, and after the end of 20 minutes he asked each of the initiates to place a banana in the fire. With 11 bananas, the flames died, but the smoke increased, and this caused some inconvenience to some of the initiates. But Prabhupada still continued, and he asked them to basically close the window so that way it does not disturb the neighbors.
Yeah. Or something. Prasanti?
Oh, okay. Swamiji smiled broadly, rose from his seat before the sacrificial fire, the blazing tongue of Vishnu, and began clapping his hands and chanting Hare Krishna. Placing one foot before the other and swaying from side to side, he began to dance before the fire. His disciples joined him in dancing and chanting, and the smoke abated. He had each disciple touch his beads, to the feet of Lord Chaitanya in the Panchatattva picture on the table. And finally, he allowed the windows open. As the ceremony was finished and the air in the apartment was clearing, Swamiji began to laugh. There was so much smoke, I thought they might have to call the fire brigade. Prabhupada was happy. He arranged that prasadam be distributed to all the devotees and guests. The fire, the prayers, the vows, and everyone chanting Hare Krishna had all created an auspicious atmosphere. Things were going forward. Now there were initiated devotees in the Western world. Finally, most of the disciples went home to their apartments, leaving their spiritual master to clean up after the initiation ceremony.
First class devotee.
September 10. The morning after the initiation, Prabhupada sat in his apartment reading from the commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. The large Sanskrit volume lay before him on his desk as he read. He wore horn-rimmed glasses which changed his demeanor, making him look extremely scholarly. He wore eyeglasses only for reading, and this added to the visual impression that he had now gone into a deep professional meditation. The room was quiet and brilliant. Mid-morning sunlight shone warmly through the window. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Yes, come in. He looked up, removing his glasses. As Mike and Jan, now Mukunda and Janaki, opened the door, peering in. He had asked to see them. Yes, yes, come in. He smiled, and they walked in and closed the door behind them. Two vivacious young Americans. From his expressive eyes, he seemed to be amused. They sat down before him, and Prabhupada playfully addressed them by their new initiated names. So you are living together, but now you have taken serious vows of initiation. So what will you do about it? Well, Mukunda seemed puzzled. Isn't there any love in Krishna consciousness?
Hmm.
So after the ceremony has finished and the fire sacrifice is done, um, Swamiji was happy. He rose from his seat, and this sacrificial fire is supposed to be the blazing tongue of Vishnu. And he got up, clapping his hands, and started chanting and started dancing. And others also followed him, dancing and chanting. And he asked each disciple to take his beads and touch the feet of Lord Chaitanya in the Panchatattva picture on his table. And everybody did that. And finally, the apartment, the smoke in the apartment cleared. And then they distributed the prasadam to devotees and guests as well. And the whole atmosphere seemed very auspicious. But the disciples and the guests, they all left, and Prabhupada has to clean up after the initiation ceremony. And after the morning after the initiation, Prabhupada started reading the commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, his large Sanskrit volume. And it also describes about the Prabhupada's appearance with his scholarly appearance in the horn-rimmed glasses. And while he was in that deep meditation, suddenly there was a knock on the door. Mike and Jan came in. So they were asked to come in by Prabhupada. So when they said, Prabhupada asked, you are living together and you have taken initiation now. So what are you going to do about it? And they were confused. And the Mukunda asked the question, isn't there any love in Krishna consciousness?
Okay, one more. Nipa, can you read? You still there? Nipa? Okay. Srikar, you can read, please. Srikar.
Swamiji nodded. Yes, so I'm saying, why don't you get married? They agreed it was a good idea, and Prabhupada immediately scheduled a wedding date for 2 days later. Swamiji,
2 days later. Wow.
2 days later. Swamiji said he would cook a big feast and hold a marriage ceremony in his apartment, and he asked Mukunda and Janaki to invite their relatives. Both Mukunda and Janaki had grown up in Oregon, and their family members found it impossible to travel such a long distance on such short notice. Only Janaki's sister, John, agreed to come. John, little did I know what kind of wedding it would be. All I knew was that they had met a Swami and were taking Sanskrit from him as well as attending his small storefront temple on 2nd Avenue. When I met the Swami, he was sitting beside the window in his front room, bathed in sunlight, surrounded by pots of prasadam, which he was distributing to the devotees who were sitting around him against the wall. I was a follower of macrobiotic and not so eager for taking this noonday meal. When I entered the room, the Swami said, "Who is this?" And Mukunda said, "This is Janaki's sister Joan. She had come from Oregon to attend the wedding." Swamiji said, "Oh, where is Oregon?" Mukunda said, "It's 3,000 miles away on the other side of the United States." And he asked, "Oh, coming from so far? Very nice. And when will the other members of the family arrive?" Then I said, "I am the only one who is coming for the wedding, Swamiji." He said, "Never mind. It is very nice that you have come. Please sit down and take some Krishna Prasadam." He offered me some dal, a rather moist sabji, yogurt, salad, and chapatis. But because I was a devotee of macrobiotic, all of this prasadam was very unpalatable to me. Practically speaking, it was sticking in my throat the whole time. But I remember looking over at the radiant and beautiful person who was so eager for me to take his prasadam that he had prepared. So I took it all. But in my mind, I decided this would be the last time I would take this luncheon with the devotees.
That is funny, huh? He's one of the best cooks, wrote the biggest cooking book in ISKCON now, later. Go ahead.
So that Srila Prabhupada now he offered them that both Mukunda and Janaki Mataji to get married, and then he said he would personally conduct the marriage, and then he fixed the wedding date 2 days later after they met Srila Prabhupada after their initiation. So Srila Prabhupada said he would cook a big feast, and then he would hold the marriage ceremony in his own apartment. And then he asked Mukunda and Janaki Mataji to invite their relatives. So both Mukunda Prabhu and Janaki Mataji, they all grew up in Oregon. So, and then all the Oregon is on the other side of West Coast, on the other side of the United States. So on such short notice, it was like very difficult for all their relatives to come and join. But Janaki Mataji's sister, Joan, she agreed to come. So Joan, she tells her experience when she first met the Prabhupada. So she never knew what kind of wedding it would be. So all she knew that her sister, she was attending. I mean, she had met a Swami and was taking Sanskrit classes from him. So when Joan Mataji first she saw Srila Prabhupada, she saw him in that small storefront beside a window, bathed in sunlight, and then he was surrounded by pots of prasadam. But she was like following macrobiotic, and then she was not so much like eager taking a noonday meal. So when she entered the room, Srila Prabhupada asked, "Who is this?" And Mukunda said that she is like Janaki Mataji's sister. And then where did she come from, or where is Oregon? And he asked all those questions. Or are there any other relatives coming? And then she said, no, she is the only one who has come all the way from Oregon. Prabhupada said, okay, never mind. It is very nice that she had come. And then he offered her a place to sit. And then he asked if she could take some Krishna Prasadam. So the prasadam consisted of dal, sabji, yogurt, salad, and chapati. But since she was like strictly following macrobiotics, all of this was like not so palatable for her. She said it was like sticking in her throat. But still, But seeing Srila Prabhupada, I mean, Srila Prabhupada's eagerness to offer prasadam, she somehow, I mean, she decided to honor prasadam. And then she said, okay, this will be the last time I would take luncheon with devotees.
Joy and miracles brings miracles. Who knows what's going to happen? Join is gem for the ISKCON movement. We will see how she's going to show her, manifest her potencies by the mercy of Prabhupada eventually. So it's 8:43. She will write, we still have this largest book in ISKCON about cooking. Some person who didn't like the cooking first, and she writes on biggest cookbooks in ISKCON actually. So thank you so much, 8:43. I hope you all relished. I was thinking we'll finish, but this Mother Yamuna, Join is Mother Yamuna actually. So I'm telling Cyprus, we know. Yamuna, who Govindam Adi Purusam Tamaham Bhajami. Every morning we play in the ISKCON. She's the one. So because she gives a lot of testimony here. So we will continue tomorrow. Okay. I want to thank you so much for joining, everyone. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.